Yeah.
Like I always thought, I don't want to be married, which was tied to, I don't want anyone to control me. I'm going to be in charge. If I get married, there's only one possible model, which is my husband's in charge. And I don't want that. But where did I ever get that idea from? I just observed my parents and created the story that there's only one way to be married. This is the dynamic. I don't want that. Therefore, I won't be married, which, to a child mind sounds just totally reasonable. But in adulthood, it's like, oh, here's a person who loves me and who I love. Wow, we can create a life that's totally different than either one of our parents. We actually can reconstruct our story about marriage and what it entails. And we have the power to do that, right? But we have to be willing to say, what are we entering into here, right? Or even sharing money. Right? Because I realize this is a very sensitive topic for married couples. But we share all our money. Like we have 100% collective. Not that I'm recommending that for anyone else. It's just what we do and what works for us. But we had to come a long way, right? From me feeling like money equals power and control to we are peers and we make decisions as equal partners about a collective pool of money. And for me, I'm so glad, I love that we have 100% integrated.
It doesn't sound like growing up, you saw a lot of those conversations around money being modeled. It was just silence. It was a do not talk zone.
Yes.
What was it like to start engaging in those conversations? Like, how did that feel? And what did that look like to be like, so we're going to talk about something that I've never seen my parents talk about?
Yeah. I mean, I think it started because I didn't want to get married. Right. And so, my husband and I were at a transition point where it's like, either we're going to get married or we're going to go our separate ways.
Yeah.
It's very, wise 22-year-olds. But instead of having some magic engagement moment, we sort of approached it more like a merger, right? Like there were a series of talks, there were a series of conversations, there were agreements made in writing, there were compromises. It took a while, right?
Got to negotiate this.
There were some negotiations. But the point is those conversations came more out of my feeling like I'm only willing to do this under certain circumstances. And that's going to require us to be really upfront about some things that I know for sure, but they're my non-negotiables and some are negotiable, but I don't want to have a problem in the future. Like, for example, I have always been clear, I don't have kids. And that's a big deal when you're partnering with someone because lots of people get married and want to have kids. That's not an unusual or unreasonable expectation. So if you kind of know that up front, you have to have that conversation, right? No matter how challenging that it is, it wouldn't be fair to the other person. I feel the same way about money because I had some strong opinions about money. These have to be conversations. I also have very strong opinions about household labor, right? And the division of household labor. So my husband has strong opinions about other things. But in the moment, it felt less awkward because we had been transparent with each other that we need to have some conversations before we can go any further. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so I think that being part of the foundation and both of us being committed to the conversation but not attached to the outcome. Right?
That's such an important point.
Right?
Because I think oftentimes we fear the outcome, so we don't have the conversation. Because what would this mean?
Or we're so attached to the outcome that we're like, I'm going to get to that outcome no matter what. Right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to get to that outcome no matter what. Even if I have to deal with a mess later on because we're not going to talk about this now, we're going to get married, right?
Yeah.
Or we're going to do this or we're going to do that. And I think I was not inclined to be attached to that particular outcome.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I was super committed to the conversation.
Yeah.
And I think my husband was the same. He wanted to have a real partnership.
Yeah.
Right? And get clear about what that looked like up front.
Yeah, because especially with marriage, if it's not going to be good,
why bother?
Because it's inherently difficult enough. Because you had mentioned like not really seeing this idea of being a rich woman modeled. What did you think it looked like kind of maybe from that high school or going to college? Like, what did it look like to be successful? And did you fit that model? Was that you? When you saw successful people, you were like, oh, that looks exactly like me, and I can just duplicate that.
Well, what's interesting is I always knew I wanted to be a teacher, right? I am a teacher. Yeah. That's just who I am in the world, whether that's my job or not.
Yeah.
Like, that's just who I am. And success was that I would be a kindergarten teacher.
Yeah.
Because I kind of look like a kindergarten teacher, let's be honest. I'm a little person with curly hair and a round, happy face. So people, so there was a lot of affirmation. Yes, that would be great, blah, blah, blah. I grew up around a lot of teachers. My dad was a principal. So education was honorable profession. It's something people perceived as success because it also had security, right? And consistency. And I went to college and I was going to be a kindergarten teacher. Right?
Do you think this kind of fit into that prescripted worldview of like, don't be like powerful people are men, kindergarten teachers, that's not too powerful. And rich people, there's inherent danger in being too rich, and kindergarten teachers don't make too much money. So like it was a nice combination of that sweet spot.
Right? So teaching is like a service. It's a way of serving other people. So all those things went together. All of this stuff was also really around safety and security. You know, keep your head down, stay quiet, and good things will happen to you. That's a worldview of constraint. 4 years into my undergraduate education, for the first time, I had a professor who was a woman of color. She was the most amazing person I had ever encountered because she wasn't just a teacher. She was in a position of intellectual authority, and she had a commanding presence. And she also was totally approachable and relatable. She just laid it out. You're going to go to graduate school, you're going to get an MA, you're going to get a PhD, and then you're going to get a job. This is the path. This is how people do it. With this mentor around entrepreneurship, she's like, you just have to figure out what the number is that you would be making in your business that would make it okay for you to leave your tenured professorship, right? So you need to do the math. Figure out what that number is. You can start experimenting with your business now. You can start making money at it now. And when you hit that number, great, you can leave and not be in fear.
Yeah.
You'll know you'll have enough business to replace your salary and even exceed it.
Yeah. There is something I remember maybe 10 years ago, I had this almost like an irrational dream or goal of writing a book. And it was irrational because it felt like 100,000 miles away. And the process was so opaque. You know, like, how does that even happen? I don't live in New York. I don't know where agents come from. Like, I don't know where they live. I don't know what publishers do. I don't, like, none of it made any sense. Like, it's 100 million miles away and I don't understand the process. But once you get close to it, you're like, oh, there's just a process.
There's just a process.
There's just a process. And sometimes the thing that I think is so beautiful about community is oftentimes we're terrified to jump into groups.
Yes.
Because we're not there. And we don't feel like we're enough. But over and over, I find the opposite to be true. People love it when you show up.
They love it.
They love it when you're curious.
They love it.
And they're so encouraging and so helpful. And they see stuff in us that is so obvious to them.
Yes.
Like, obviously, you would be a great professor.
Yes.
Obviously, you'll be an incredible entrepreneur.
Yes.
Like, it's so apparent to them.
Yes.
And oftentimes they're so generous with what is obvious to them. And it just seems like, really?
Yes.
Like, I think we feel so much more on the outside than we have to.
And it's that there is this well-worn path to everything, right? There is a process to all of it. Yeah. And all you ever need is somebody to demystify it.
Yes.
Right? Because as soon as someone says, okay, this is how you go from A to Z. This is how I went. This is what I learned along the path. Let me help you make some contacts, right? All of a sudden, it seems really clear. And then it just becomes a matter of doing the work.
Yeah.
But when it all feels all nebulous and mystical and like you can't get your arms around it, you can't see the path, right? Much less know how to navigate it. I think that's when we just get stuck.
Yeah. I think that's one of in this idea of like, how do we be true to ourselves? And it sounds counterintuitive, but sometimes it's through those conversations and through those relationships that something in them resonates with something in you. And it's like a tuning fork. And then they say, here's the path. And it gives you permission to start on that journey.
And it is, I always think of it as like an upward spiral, right? So there's clearly this interaction going on. There's this energetic exchange, but there's something that shifts in you, or at least I'll speak for myself. There's something that shifts in me when I speak a dream and someone else starts taking it seriously. They start talking about it like, I'm actually going to go do that. They're talking to me as if I'm already in the process of doing it. All of a sudden in me, what shifts is, oh, somebody else actually believes I can do this. Oh, maybe then I can do it. I start then talking about it differently and interacting with them differently because I want to meet their expectation that I'm serious about this dream. And the more serious and energized and engaged I get, then the more energized they get to help me, right? Because people love to help other people get to their dream.
And
right?
we love seeing people take action. We love the hope is infectious. Yes. And I think everyone who's had any degree of success and experienced that joy loves, I love to see people like take agency. Yes. And just believe things. I believe it, but there's something so encouraging about seeing them start to believe it. And even in that kind of being true to themselves, it's like, it starts to crack open. Yeah. And that you're so true. It was so correct in that idea of once people have walked the path, they don't think it's that long of a path. Before we start, we're like, well, that's about 100-mile jaunt there. Like, I don't think I can even start. And people who've got it, it's like, it's like 5 miles. Totally. I mean, it's going to take some time, but this is not an ultra marathon.
It is not. And I feel like I'm incomplete with my own success until I share it with somebody else. In other words, like, I don't feel complete when I've achieved something until that moment or those moments when I'm sharing how I got there with other people, so that just as a way of ushering in them along the path, right? Yeah. Like when I start sharing it, then I start to settle into the completeness of it, right? Yeah. Until then, it's just sort of, woohoo for me. I'm certainly happy about it, but it doesn't feel like it's reached its fullness. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of like that last layer of identity.
Yes.
That it like sets it up.
Yes.
You know, when your dish finally sets in the oven, it looked like a quiche before.
Yes.
But then there's that tipping point of you're like, it's set up. Now we can pull this out and serve.
Yes.
If you were to give kind of a closing encouragement for people who they're grown-ups. Mm-hmm. They're grown-ups and they're still thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? Because sometimes it changes. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you start wanting to be a kindergarten teacher, yep. And then you want to be a college professor, mm-hmm. and then you want to be an entrepreneur. Yep. What would be that next step that would be the most high leverage thing? If they can only do one mm-hmm. thing, what would you encourage them in starting to rethink this identity?
Well, I'll just say how I've done it mm-hmm. because I've had a couple different chapters and a couple different transitions. For me, it's real basic, mm-hmm. like literally as basic as getting on a piece of paper and some markers and circle in the middle is like, who am I? Yeah. Right? I know without a shadow of a doubt, I'm a teacher and a mentor. That's just who I am. That's the through line of my whole life. If I didn't know, I could analyze the previous chapters. I would see this is when I'm most alive. This is when I'm most fulfilled. But then I sort of imagine around that circle, what are all the different things that I could do mm-hmm. being who I am? What could I do if I pointed my gifts and talents in the direction of what I love right now? Right? And I never want to come up with one thing because when we get in that binary thinking, we just get really locked in. So I literally sort of brainstormed 10 to 12 things that I could do given who I am with the gifts and talents I have in the direction of what I love. Right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, it's literal brainstorming, right? Like, how do I think of as many possible ways being me, that I could do something amazing for people that I love? They usually end up being really wide ranging. Yeah. Some have to do with individual level work. Some have to do with more leadership work, some organizational work. But then when I have a whole bunch of possibilities, I just start exploring them. Like literally, maybe 3 or 4 look interesting. So I just start calling people who actually do those things and get in conversation. Because if I ask them, like, what's it really like? I start to get the day-to-day of how that would be. That narrows possibilities, right?
I find conversations, it is one of my test and scale go-tos. Like,
I don't know why more people don't do it.
Just try talking to people. But it's so funny because our instinct is so counterintuitive. Like, well, I'll just read about it online and I'll read a book and I'll think about it and I'll think about it and I'll try not to think about it. And I'm like, just have a conversation. Have a conversation. It's the fastest way to move the ball down the field or to cross it off the list.
Yes. Well, it's interesting. One of my mentors always says, isolation is the dream killer.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
So if you're just playing with the idea in the echo chamber of your mind and your information source is the internet or a really good book, it's just different than being in conversation with somebody who that is their current reality, right? And once you get in conversation with them, I don't know about you, but my intuition will tell me, my body will tell me whether I'm in the right road or I've taken a wrong turn. In other words, like if I have a conversation and it is just boring as hell and like I'm getting sleepy, I'm yawning. Everything the person is telling me sounds horrible. You know what? It's okay. I'm going to validate with a few more conversations. But if I have 2 or 3 conversations and everyone's telling me the same thing, okay, that's really good for me to know, right? Yep. If I have conversations and it starts to be that upward spiral of energy, and actually what people are telling me about the reality of it is way more interesting than I even imagined. Yeah. Okay, well, at that point, I can narrow the possibilities. And once I've narrowed the possibilities, I just start experimenting. I just find a way to do a short-term experiment. Yep. Because once I get myself in something, I'm going to know. Yep. I can trust and know that like when something is right for me, things open up. Like I get in a flow. I feel energized instead of drained afterwards, right? I can't get enough of it. That's when I know I'm on the right path.
I liken it to trying on clothes. Mm-hmm. I had to go buy a new pair of pants this week. And sometimes I can put one leg into one pant and I'm like, nope.
This ain't it.
Nope. This obviously is not going to work. And there are some things you try and you're like, I don't know, this fits quite right.
Yeah.
It feels tight. It feels weird. I feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there's every once in a magical while, you try something on, you start twirling. Mm-hmm. Start twirling. You're like, ooh, could I wear this out of here? Like, it just fits a little different.
Yes.
And it creates a different energy and it creates your posture gets a little different. And it doesn't, I think that's such a great intuition.
Yes.
Like it doesn't take long to figure out.
Yes.
You can try something on, you're like,
yes.
No.
Yes.
Takes you about 2 seconds to figure that out. Maybe half a leg.
This one time I was thinking, I don't know why, but one of my experiments was I was thinking I might want to be a pastor. And so I just designed an experiment, which was I went and there was a summer divinity school. So I could go just for it's 8 weeks. And, I had the summer and it was in New Orleans. And I thought this would be a great way for me to see if divinity school is for me, blah, blah, blah. The only class that fit my schedule was a class called Preaching in the Black Tradition. So I thought we were going to watch videos, analyze other people preaching. No, ma'am. I don't know if that's the tradition. I don't know if the tradition is watch videos and read about it. So I should have known I was in trouble when we would get our assignment of what we were going to preach on. And literally I was like, is this in the Old Testament or the New Testament? Lots of eye rolling around me. I was like, could I borrow a Bible? I didn't bring one.
All good signs. All good signs.
But I knew I was doomed when I was doing my thing. And this woman was like, because there's a call and response rhythm. And someone said, help her, Jesus. When people are praying for you while you're
yeah.
You need to just hang it up, right?
Yeah.
And so again, it was a great experience. I got to live in New Orleans for 8 weeks. I got to learn something I didn't know. I incredibly increased my public speaking skills. But also I knew if I were trying this on, this was like a very ill-fitting garment.
Wrong size jacket. Has a jacket made for somebody else's fit. Yeah.
And
I love that. Oh my God.
The reality is, I think if we're really trying to figure things out, it's not something we're going to figure out in our head.
No.
It's something we're going to figure out by putting ourselves in positions that make us uncomfortable. Because when we're in, and it doesn't have to be as dramatic as that example, but just putting ourselves in an environment that stretches us beyond what feels comfortable, that's when our real self is going to show up. Yeah. That's when we're going to realize, is this stimulating to me or not? Am I loving this? Or is this just like agony? Does every minute feel like an hour? Or did a whole day go by and I feel like it was so quick, right? That's when we figure things out. And actually, there's a lot of joy in figuring things out that way. I think you're the person who said to me, if you actually go try things, it's really useful to be able to cross things off the list.
Oh, that's 100% like a successful outcome.
Kerry Ann will never be a pastor. Check. Okay.
Cross it off the list.
We could just cross that off the list, frees up a whole bunch of energy for other things, right? But it's okay.
I also find even in the things I cross off the list, and even in those, a misnomer might be a failed experiment. Mm-hmm. man, there are nuggets that I learned.
Yes.
You might realize this whole format might not be exactly what I need to be talking about.
Yes.
But maybe I do love the talking part. Maybe I do love the community part. Maybe I love the energy part. There's something that resonates, even if that package as a whole isn't exactly the right fit.
Yes.
You're like, I hate this blazer, but that color.
Yes.
Now that color is what caught my eye. And it helps us tease out what is true to us and what we should take going forward and what we can happily leave behind.
And you learn about yourself.
Yes.
Like, biggest thing I learned about myself, my preacher teacher was a large man, like really like barrel chest, like 6 foot something, just a presence, right? And he was like, girl, you got to take up space. Baby girl, you got to take up some space. I was like, I'm taking up space. I think I am. He's like, you are a very small person. Like, you have to energetically take up space. You have to fill a room. And you have to get all up in the base of your voice. And you have to learn how to project. Like, you have to do more because you're little, right? It's easy for people to just, especially in a large space, to not see you. So what is it that's uncomfortable for you about being seen? Like, why are you hiding in your own body? Why are you hiding in your little girl voice? You sound like a little kid. Like, I know your voice is deeper than that. And that's about, again, that didn't have to do with preaching. That had to do with standing in your own authority, right?
And what answers did you come up with those questions?
I didn't even know what he was talking about. Sometimes someone will speak the truth on you and you're not ready for it, right? And it lands right in your gut because you know it's true. But you don't know what to do with it in the moment, right? This was not something I could process before practicing or delivering. But it sat with me for a while. And I knew it was something to work on. So guess what? That was something I took straight to therapy. Like, why am I hiding? Like, I'm already small. Why am I minimizing myself with my posture? Why am I wearing all black all the time, which is just further hiding myself? Why am I afraid to just let my voice roar, both literally and metaphorically? Like, what is it that's keeping me from stepping into my own authority, right? And that was a lot of untangling, right, that needed to happen. But if I hadn't ever stepped into that experiment, there would be no opportunity for somebody to see me, right? Sometimes people see possibility in you, which is powerful as hell. And it's also super helpful when people see, like, I see so much possibility in you, and I also see that you're hiding. I also see that you don't want to be seen. I also see that you're afraid to really say and really speak your truth.
Did you have anything? Was there, in the unpacking, was there any aha moment? Or was there any new revelation that, because now Kerry Ann, I know, takes up a lot of space and fills a room. And is like,
there's no more little
small
voice.
Package. It's
a lot.
You see her coming. You see her coming, and like, you pay attention.
It just goes back to childhood messaging, right? Like, in my household, children were to be seen and not heard, right? We were, the only family of color in an entirely white neighborhood in a mostly white community. And because of that, we had to be very well behaved. Plus, we were the principal's kids, right? So there was no room for acting out, being loud. being outside of the boundaries of acceptable behavior.
Yeah.
There was a way in which we had to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
And perfect in that context meant being quiet and respectable and dignified, right? And frankly, fading into the background. My parents didn't want us to be seen, right? So, again, you have to always keep drilling down to like, what's the root of that? Like, what am I afraid of? But also like, is this serving me?
Yeah.
And is it serving other people? Because the reality is, usually my typical way of thinking is often very small. And if we stay in that small thinking, we give up the potential to help so many people. Yeah. Right? Before I started my business, I started a mentoring program on my campus. And all I wanted in the whole world was to run this little mentoring program on my campus for other faculty and have a little budget. If somebody had just let me do that, I would never have thought about doing anything else, because that is as big as my mind could think. But because somebody wouldn't let me do it, it forced me to step out of that. Yeah. And it forced me to start something. And in hindsight, I can now see there are 100,000 people who would not have been served if I had just gotten my way and been able to continue to think in a small way, right? Yeah. In some ways, it's a huge gift when someone rejects you, throws you under the bus, won't let you have the small thing you want. You have to think bigger and you have to see things bigger. You have to take bigger risks. But none of that is about for your own. It's not, just so I can do more. It's really, I would have sacrificed helping so many people by staying small. Yeah.
Although I think that's also a great lesson in that you loved the process. And so many times I see people want outcomes.
Yes.
Like, I would love to have a big multi-million-dollar company. I would love to be a CEO.
Yeah.
I would love that outcome.
Yeah.
And they don't actually love any of the process.
Yeah.
I would love to have written a book.
Yes.
And they don't like writing.
Yes.
They don't love their daily writing habit. And I think it goes to show, like, you loved the process.
Yes.
Even if the outcome was small.
Yes.
You loved the process.
I loved the process. And you only know if you love the process if you experiment with it, right?
100%.
Because this is the thing I think that jams people up. They get fixated on a dream, the outcome, right? The title, the goodies you get, the esteem of others when you get the thing. They focus on the outcome, but they don't even, understand what the process is, haven't stuck their toe in the water. If you only know if you love that process by getting in there and doing it. You can't imagine your way into it, right? And you can't white knuckle through it because most things that are really delicious, like there's a lot of work, right? There's a huge ton of work that goes into it. And it also, I think, just if we don't love the process, it makes the day-to-day quite gruesome.
Yeah, I think the outcome, one, I don't think people tend to get to the outcome if you don't love the process. Yeah. And even if you do, it falls flat. Yeah. Because part of the joy is that you've loved the whole journey. And it's actually for teachers. It's one of my go-to pieces of advice for people who want to be elementary school teachers. Like, before you do 4 years, just show up at the elementary school. Do you like... Because that is such a common story of people in 4 years of college. And then they realize, I don't like hanging out with a whole bunch, 30 little kids all day long. Isn't my jam. And I'm like, you could have tried that as a teenager. You could have tried that year one.
For $0.
$0. You just could have showed up and in a week...
$0.
Yeah.
And frankly, I think the reality is also that sometimes we love our dreams so much as a dream.
Mm-hmm.
We just want to have it as a dream.
Yeah.
We're more attached to it as a dream than we are of actually doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And in some ways, it's usually super easy to get a little taste of your dream to decide, do I want to go do that? It sounds really obvious when we're talking about it. Mm-hmm. Actually, why don't you just go get in a classroom and see if you even like it? Yeah. That doesn't cost you anything except some time, right? And making the arrangements. And it'll be helpful to other people, even if it doesn't turn out for you.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to do, I shouldn't say nobody. Most people either A, they're terrified to just get in it, and they're so blocked that they can't see what the experiment would be in their own mind, or they kind of just want to keep it as a dream, just kind of delicious to talk about occasionally, and you know, they like having it as they just want to play with it as a fantasy, right? And ultimately, I think when it gets down to it, this is why conversation and community is so important, because sometimes you can't see the experiment that's right in front of your face.
No, but it's so obvious to the person next to you who's like, well, why don't you just go try to do that? Like, how about tomorrow? Do you have time tomorrow?
Totally.
And it's demystifying it, and it's taking this is going to take a long time because it's 100,000 miles, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, it's like 5 miles down the road. So if you just go next door.
Yeah, totally.
and you do the thing next door, and then if you like it, we'll keep walking.
Indeed.
Okay, let's take a little break. I need another beverage. And then we'll actually do the interview.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
You haven't done the interview?
In a word, no. I'm so sorry. We haven't done any of it.
This should be the interview. Not just because it's been so long.
Not just because you can't take it anymore.
No. Like, I'm seriously like, I'm sitting here thinking about everything you're saying, and I'm realizing I need to change my life.